Marcus Jackson's body contorted violently as 50,000 volts of electricity surged through him. His muscles seized in rapid spasms, limbs rigid and uncontrollable as he collapsed onto the freshly cut lawn. The smell of singed cotton rose from where the metal prongs had pierced his favorite blue t-shirt. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their phones held high, capturing every horrifying second of the 17-year-old honor student convulsing on his own front yard. "Stop. That's my son." Diane Jackson's scream tore through the evening air as she lunged forward from the porch steps, only to be restrained by another officer. Her anguished cries melded with the static crackle of police radios and the murmurs of the growing crowd. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched helplessly as her boy, her gentle, music-loving boy, writhed on the ground while an officer towered over him, taser still pointed, face an expressionless mask. Across the street, Patricia Winters stood with arms crossed over her pink cardigan, her thin lips pressed into a satisfied line. "I told them to turn that noise down," she muttered to no one in particular, though loud enough for nearby neighbors to hear. They should have listened. But how had a Friday evening of music and friendship disintegrated into this nightmarish tableau? The answer lay 12 hours earlier, when Marcus had been nothing more than a teenager looking forward to the weekend. The morning had begun like any other in the Riverside Heights subdivision of Oakwood. Marcus had risen early, despite it being the start of spring break. AP exams were just 5 weeks away, and Mrs. Rodriguez had assigned practice problems that wouldn't solve themselves. He'd settled at the kitchen table with his calculus textbook, the house quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and his mother's soft footsteps overhead. "You're up with the birds," Diane observed, padding into the kitchen in her hospital scrubs. She pressed a kiss to the top of his head before reaching for the coffee pot. Thought teenagers were supposed to sleep until noon during spring break. Marcus looked up from a particularly challenging integration problem. Track team doesn't take breaks, and neither does calculus. He tapped his pencil against the notebook. "Besides, if I finish this morning, I can have people over tonight without stressing." Diane poured herself coffee, the rich aroma filling the sunlit kitchen. "Music night." When he nodded, she smiled. "That's fine. Just remember. Keep it respectful." "I know," Marcus finished, mimicking her oft-repeated phrase with a grin. "We're just going to play some tracks Jamal and I have been working on. Maybe order pizza." "That's my responsible boy." She ruffled his short curls. "I've got the late shift, so I won't be back until around midnight. Text me if you need anything." Marcus nodded, already returning to the problem that had been eluding him. By the time the doorbell rang at 7 that evening, he had finished his calculus, cleaned the house, and set up his equipment in the finished basement, a modest collection of instruments, speakers, and mixing equipment he'd saved for over 2 years to purchase. "My man!" Jamal's enthusiastic greeting came with their elaborate handshake as Marcus opened the door. Behind him stood Zoe and Tyler, carrying chips and sodas. "Parents said midnight," Tyler announced, stepping past Marcus. "But they'll text if they need me home earlier." Zoe adjusted her glasses, a notebook tucked under one arm. "I brought lyrics for that beat you sent last week. I think it could really work with the arrangement." The four friends moved into the house, the energy electric between them. Music was their common language, their sanctuary. Marcus with his production skills and piano training, Jamal on drums, Zoe's haunting vocals, and Tyler's versatile guitar playing had created a sound uniquely theirs. For the past year, they'd been recording original tracks in Marcus's makeshift studio, dreaming of the day their music might reach beyond the confines of their suburban lives. By 8:30, they'd ordered pizza and were deep into their creative flow. The basement studio vibrated with a smooth R&B track they were developing. The volume modest, but clear enough to work with. Windows were closed, though the spring air was inviting, a precaution Marcus always took during their sessions. "Let's try that bridge again," Marcus suggested, adjusting levels on his laptop. "Zoe, maybe come in a beat earlier with that high note." The doorbell's sudden, insistent ring interrupted them. Marcus glanced at his watch, confused. "Pizza came like an hour ago," he muttered, heading upstairs. When he opened the front door, Patricia Winters stood on his porch, arms folded across her chest, foot tapping an impatient rhythm. At 52, Patricia had appointed herself the unofficial neighborhood monitor. Her position as HOA treasurer gave her a sense of authority she wielded like a weapon. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she demanded without preamble. Marcus blinked, genuinely confused. About 8:45. "Exactly. And some of us are trying to enjoy a peaceful evening without being subjected to your—" She paused, nose wrinkling. "Noise." "I'm sorry. Ms. Winters," Marcus replied, his tone respectful despite his confusion. The music was playing at a reasonable volume, and they'd received no complaints from immediate neighbors before. "We're just working on some music in the basement. The windows are closed." "Well, it's not enough. I can hear that rap garbage from my living room." Her emphasis on rap carried unmistakable disdain. "It's actually R&B, Marcus corrected gently. "But I'll turn it down more. Sorry for disturbing you." Patricia's thin lips pressed together. "This isn't the first time. You know, every weekend it's something with this house. Your mother should teach you better manners." The comment stung, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. "I'll turn it down right now. Have a good evening, Ms. Winters." He closed the door before she could respond and returned to the basement, where his friends looked at him expectantly. "Neighbor complaint," he explained, turning down the volume further. "We need to keep it extra quiet tonight." Jamal rolled his eyes. "Let me guess, the dragon lady from across the street, man. She's been on your case ever since your family moved here." Marcus shrugged, unwilling to voice what they all suspected, that Patricia's issues had little to do with noise, and more to do with being uncomfortable with the only black family on the block. "Let's just keep working. We can use headphones for the detailed stuff." For the next hour, they continued their session at a much lower volume, barely audible beyond the basement walls. Despite the constraint, their creative energy remained high, and by 10 o'clock, they had nearly completed the track. "This is fire," Tyler said, nodding along to the playback. "Seriously, Marcus, you could sell this beat to actual artists." Zoe agreed, scribbling final adjustments to her lyrics. "We should record a proper version next week. I think—" The sound of heavy knocking interrupted her. Not the doorbell this time, but authoritative pounding that resonated through the house. The four teenagers exchanged glances. "What now?" Jamal muttered. Marcus sighed. "I'll handle it. You guys keep working." He jogged up the stairs, the knocking growing more insistent. When he pulled open the front door, two police officers stood on his porch, their postures rigid and hands resting near their belts. The older officer, a stocky white man with a crew cut, stepped forward. "We've received a noise complaint about this residence," he stated, voice clipped and official. His nameplate read, "Officer Daniels." Marcus's heart rate accelerated, though he kept his expression composed. "I'm sorry. Officer, we're just making some music in the basement. A neighbor came by earlier, and we turned it way down after that. The second officer, younger with close-cropped blonde hair, surveyed the interior of the house visible through the doorway. We got a call about a loud party and potential underage drinking. What? No, sir, Marcus said, surprise evident in his voice. It's just 4 of us working on music. No alcohol at all. Officer Daniels narrowed his eyes. Where are your parents, son? My mom's at work. She's a nurse at Oakwood Memorial. She has the late shift tonight. So there's no adult supervision here. The question carried an accusatory edge. I'm 17, sir. My friends are just over to work on music. The younger officer stepped closer. Mind if we come in and take a look around? Something in Marcus's chest tightened. He'd heard enough stories, watched enough news to know his rights, but also to understand the precariousness of his situation. Actually, sir, I'd prefer to wait until my mother gets home. Could I call her? Officer Daniels's expression hardened. That sounds like you have something to hide. No, sir, I don't. What's going on? Jamal appeared in the hallway behind Marcus, followed by Zoe and Tyler. The officers' postures shifted subtly, tension radiating from them as they noted Jamal's presence. Everyone step outside onto the porch, Daniels ordered, his hand moving to rest on his holster. Why? Marcus asked, confusion mixing with growing apprehension. We haven't done anything wrong. Outside, now. The order brooked no argument. The 4 teenagers exchanged glances, but complied, stepping onto the porch. Across the street, Patricia Winters stood watching from her driveway, arms crossed in satisfaction. IDs, the younger officer demanded. All of you. Tyler and Zoe immediately reached for their wallets. Marcus had left his inside, and Jamal had his in his back pocket, but hesitated before reaching for it. My ID's in the house, Marcus explained. Can I go get it? Stay where you are, Daniel snapped. He turned to Jamal. You, ID? Now. It's in my back pocket, Jamal said carefully. I'm going to reach for it slowly. Okay. Just do it, the officer replied impatiently. As Jamal slowly moved his hand toward his pocket, the younger officer suddenly stepped forward. Keep your hands where I can see them. The conflicting commands froze Jamal in place, his expression a mixture of confusion and fear. Officer, Marcus intervened, you just asked for his ID, and it's in his... Step back, Daniels barked, pushing Marcus backward with a firm hand to the chest. The unexpected force sent Marcus stumbling off the porch and onto the front lawn. Hey, he protested, regaining his balance. You can't just push me like that. Get your hands off him, Zoe shouted, her voice rising with indignation. In seconds, the situation spiraled. The younger officer grabbed Jamal's arm, twisting it behind his back. Tyler stepped forward in protest and found himself shoved against the porch railing. Neighbors began emerging from their homes, drawn by the escalating commotion. Everyone calm down, Marcus shouted, raising his hands in a placating gesture as he stood on the lawn. Please, we can sort this out. Officer Daniels turned toward him, face flushed with anger. Get on the ground now! What? Why? Marcus remained standing, hands still raised. This is my house. I haven't done anything. The next few seconds unfolded with nightmarish clarity. Daniels reached for his taser, shouting about non-compliance. Neighbors gasped. Phones appeared, recording, and Marcus, frozen in disbelief on his own front lawn, heard the distinctive sound of the taser deploying before 50,000 volts sent him crashing to the ground. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a total seizure of his body, muscles contracting beyond his control. Through the haze of agony, he was vaguely aware of Zoe screaming, of Jamal being forced onto the ground, of Tyler yelling into his phone. And then, his mother's voice, piercing through it all as she arrived home early from her shift, witnessing her son convulsing on their lawn. "Stop, that's my son?" The next hours passed in a blur of humiliation and injustice. The teenagers were handcuffed and made to sit on the curb while officers searched the house without consent, finding nothing illicit. Marcus, still disoriented from the taser, had difficulty focusing as Diane argued vehemently with the officers, her nursing credentials and community standing ultimately preventing arrests, but not sparing them the ordeal. "This is outrageous," Diane insisted, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage as she stood protectively near her son. "These are honor students. This is private property. You had absolutely no right to escalate this situation or to tase my child." Officer Daniels remained unmoved. "Ma'am, your son refused to comply with lawful orders. We responded appropriately to the situation." "What situation?" she demanded. "A noise complaint for music you couldn't even hear when you arrived." A crowd had gathered, neighbors in nightclothes and robes, watching the scene unfold. Some filmed quietly. Others whispered among themselves. Patricia Winters stood apart, her expression a mixture of vindication and growing uncertainty as the excessive police response became clear. By midnight, the officers finally left, issuing warnings about disturbing the peace, but filing no formal charges. The teenagers' parents had all arrived, their faces etched with outrage and concern. Marcus sat on the porch steps, a blanket around his shoulders, still trembling slightly from the aftereffects of the taser. "This isn't over," Diane told the departing officers, her voice carrying in the night air. "Not by a long shot." After the police cars pulled away, Tyler's father, Michael Chen, approached Diane. As a civil rights attorney, his expression was grave with professional assessment. "Diane, this is textbook excessive force. The body camera footage alone." He shook his head. "I want you to come to my office tomorrow. We need to talk about next steps." Inside the house, once the other families had left with promises of support, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, an ice pack pressed against his shoulder where the taser prongs had left angry red marks. His phone buzzed constantly with messages and video clips already circulating on social media. "How are you feeling?" Diane asked softly, placing a cup of tea in front of him. Marcus stared at the steaming liquid. Humiliated, angry. His voice cracked slightly. "Scared. I did everything right. Mom, I was respectful. I kept my hands visible. And they still—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Diane pulled her chair closer, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "I know, baby. I know." Her voice trembled, then steadied with resolve. "But we're going to fight this. What happened tonight was wrong on every level, and they will not get away with it." Neither of them slept much that night. Marcus lay awake, replaying the events, wondering what he could have done differently, knowing deep down that nothing would have changed the outcome. Some situations were predetermined by factors beyond his control. By morning, the videos had gone viral. Local news vans parked along their street, reporters seeking statements. Marcus's phone contained dozens of messages, classmates, teachers, distant relatives who had seen the footage. Jamal texted that his shoulder was bruised from being forced to the ground. Zoe reported that she couldn't stop crying. Tyler's father had already filed formal complaints. The Riverside Heights community chat group exploded with activity. Some neighbors expressed outrage at the police response. Others defended the officers. A few questioned why the teenagers hadn't just complied. The divide was revealing. Fault lines of bias exposed by crisis. Around noon, as Diane spoke with Michael Chen on the phone about legal options, the doorbell rang. Marcus approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. On their porch stood Eleanor Watson, the retired music teacher who lived 2 doors down, and beside her, surprisingly, was Mr. Rivera, whose house shared a back fence with theirs. Marcus opened the door cautiously. "Hello, Mrs. Watson. Mr. Rivera." "Marcus, dear," Eleanor began, her kind face creased with concern. "We wanted to check on you. What happened last night was absolutely disgraceful." Mr. Rivera nodded solemnly. "I was in my backyard when this all started. I could barely hear your music, just a faint bass line. Nothing disturbing. What that woman did, calling the police with exaggerated claims..." He shook his head in disgust. Eleanor held out a small device. "I brought this. It's a decibel meter I use for my home piano lessons. I thought it might help to have some actual measurements if that woman tries these tactics again." Marcus accepted the device, surprised and touched by their support. "Thank you. That's really thoughtful." "We're organizing a neighborhood meeting," Eleanor continued. "Many of us are disturbed by what happened and want to make sure it doesn't happen again. Would you and your mother be willing to attend?" Before Marcus could respond, Diane appeared behind him. "We'd be happy to," she said firmly. "This isn't just about what happened to Marcus. It's about making sure our community is safe for everyone." As the day progressed, more neighbors came by, some with food, others with offers of support or witness statements. But it was the arrival of Jamila Brooks, a local news reporter, that truly shifted the dynamic. "I'd like to interview you both," she explained, sitting in their living room. "The footage is compelling, but the public needs to understand the context. Who you are, what actually happened before the cameras started rolling." Marcus hesitated, uncomfortable with the attention, but Diane placed a reassuring hand on his knee. "People need to hear your voice, not just see you as a victim in a viral video." The interview was thorough and respectful. Jamila asked about Marcus's academic achievements, his music, his college aspirations. She inquired about previous interactions with Patricia Winters, about the neighborhood dynamics, about their experiences as one of the few Black families in Riverside Heights. "We've lived here for 3 years," Diane explained. "Marcus was 14 when we moved in. There have been incidents, comments, assumptions, but nothing like this." When the conversation turned to the police encounter, Marcus struggled to maintain his composure. "The worst part wasn't even the physical pain," he admitted. "It was the helplessness, the knowledge that nothing I said or did mattered, because their minds were already made up about who I was." After the reporter left, promising the segment would air that evening, Marcus retreated to his room, emotionally drained. His phone contained a text from Jamal. "Meeting at the park, 4 p.m. Everyone's coming. We need to talk." With Diane's permission, Marcus walked to the community park 3 blocks from their house. He found not just his close friends, but nearly 30 students from Oakwood High gathered near the basketball courts. Many wore blue shirts, the school color, in what appeared to be a deliberate show of solidarity. Jamal spotted him first, rushing over to embrace him. "You okay, man?" Marcus nodded, overwhelmed by the turnout. "What is all this?" "Support," Zoe said simply, joining them. "And action planning. Tyler's dad is helping us organize a speak-out at next week's city council meeting." The gathering was both cathartic and strategic. Students shared their own experiences with profiling and prejudice. Teachers who had come expressed their outrage and commitment to advocacy. Plans were made for a peaceful demonstration before the council meeting, with demands for police accountability and revised protocols for response to nonviolent calls. As the meeting concluded, Marcus noticed a figure hovering at the edge of the group, Patricia Winters' 17-year-old granddaughter. Emma, who attended their school but ran in different social circles. She approached hesitantly as the crowd began to disperse. "Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute?" He tensed, unsure of her intentions, but nodded. "I'm really sorry about what happened," she said, voice low and strained. "What my grandmother did. It wasn't right." Marcus studied her face, finding what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Why did she do it?" "We weren't being loud." Emma's gaze dropped to the ground. "She does this. It's like a power thing for her. She's called the police on Mr. Gupta's family for their cooking smells, on the Martinez kids for playing basketball in their own driveway." She hesitated, then added, "But with your family, it's been different. Worse. She says things sometimes when she thinks I'm not listening." The implication hung in the air between them. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked quietly. "Because I have videos," Emma replied. "On my phone, of her making calls, bragging about it afterward, including yesterday, when she admitted to exaggerating about a party and drinking to make sure the police would come quickly." She pulled out her phone. "I started recording her months ago, when I realized how wrong it was. I want to help make this right." The revelation stunned Marcus into momentary silence. Here was evidence that Patricia's call had been deliberately misleading, a revelation that could dramatically shift the narrative around the police response. "You should talk to Tyler's dad," he finally said. "He's handling the legal side of things." Emma nodded, determination replacing her earlier hesitation. "I will. And Marcus, I'll testify if I need to. I don't care if she's my grandmother. This has to stop." That evening, the Jackson home became command central for what was rapidly evolving into a community movement. Michael Chen arrived with legal documents and strategies. Eleanor Watson brought more neighbors. Jamila's news segment aired, presenting Marcus as the accomplished student he was, rather than just another black teenager in a confrontation with police. The most stunning moment came when Emma arrived with her parents, Patricia's own son and daughter-in-law, who appeared deeply embarrassed by their family connection to the incident. "We've been trying to address my mother's behavior for years," Emma's father explained gravely. "But this crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. The videos Emma recorded." He shook his head. "We're here to make this right." Emma transferred her recordings to Michael's laptop. The most damning was from the previous evening, captured in Patricia's living room shortly before she made the call. "They think they can just move into our neighborhood and turn it into a ghetto." Patricia's voice rang clearly through the laptop speakers. "Well, I know how to handle this. One call about underage drinking, and those police officers will shut it down properly. They know how to handle these people." The recording continued, documenting her call to 911 with fabricated claims about a large party with alcohol and drugs, none of which had been remotely true. Diane pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes glistening with unshed tears of rage. Marcus sat perfectly still, the confirmation of what they'd suspected hitting him with physical force. "This changes everything," Michael said quietly. "This is filing a false police report, at minimum. Potentially a hate crime if we can establish pattern and intent." The meeting continued late into the night, strategy evolving with the new evidence. By the time everyone left, a multi-pronged approach had been developed: legal action against both Patricia Winters and the police department, a formal presentation at the upcoming city council meeting, continued media engagement, and a peaceful demonstration to be held the following weekend. Marcus lay awake that night, his mind racing with everything that had happened and what was still to come. The taser marks on his shoulder throbbed dully, a physical reminder of how quickly life could change. Yet amid the trauma and outrage, something else had emerged: a sense of community stronger than he'd ever experienced in Riverside Heights. The days that followed brought unexpected developments. The police department issued a tepid statement about reviewing the incident that satisfied no one. The mayor, facing mounting public pressure, called for an independent investigation. Patricia Winters received a formal notice that she was under investigation for filing a false police report. Most surprisingly, Officer Daniels, the one who had tased Marcus, was revealed to have a history of excessive force complaints, all previously dismissed, but now under renewed scrutiny. The younger officer came forward through proper channels to acknowledge that protocols had not been followed that night. 5 days after the incident, Emma's recordings were made public through Jamila's news station. The community reaction was swift and decisive. Patricia Winters' position as HOA treasurer was immediately terminated. Neighbors who had been hesitant to take sides found their voices in collective condemnation of her actions. For Marcus, returning to normal life seemed impossible. His body had healed, but the psychological impact remained: a flinch when police cars passed, a hesitation before opening his own front door. Yet he found strength and purpose, working with Jamal, Zoe, and Tyler to compose a powerful song about the experience that they planned to perform at the demonstration. The night before the city council meeting, Marcus sat at his keyboard, fingers moving through the melody they had created. The composition had evolved from anger to something more complex, a call not just for justice, but for understanding, for community, for change that would outlast the current news cycle. Diane paused in his doorway, listening. "That's beautiful," she said when he finished. "Painful, but beautiful." Marcus nodded, running his fingers lightly over the keys. "That's how it feels. All of this, it hurts, but something beautiful is coming from it too." The city council meeting exceeded all expectations. The chamber was filled beyond capacity, with people standing along walls and spilling into the hallway. Marcus and Diane sat in the front row, surrounded by supporters wearing blue ribbons that had become the symbol of their cause. When his turn came to speak, Marcus approached the podium with steady steps. The microphone captured his clear, composed voice as he recounted the events of that night and their broader implications. "What happened to me could happen to any young person of color in our community," he stated. "The issue isn't just one neighbor with prejudice, or 2 officers who overreacted. It's about the systems that enable these incidents and the culture that normalizes them." He outlined specific proposals: mandatory de-escalation training for police, civilian oversight of complaint investigations, community liaison officers who actually knew the neighborhoods they served, and consequences for those who weaponized 911 calls. "I shouldn't have been tased on my own lawn for simply existing in my own home," he concluded. "No one should. But if my experience can create meaningful change, Then perhaps some good can come from it. I love this community. I want to be proud to call it home. Please help make that possible. The response was immediate, a standing ovation that continued for nearly 2 minutes. Even council members who had initially seemed defensive were visibly moved. Michael Chen presented the legal aspects of the case, including Emma's recordings. Emma herself spoke briefly but powerfully about the importance of standing up against racism, even when it came from family. Other community members shared similar experiences, painting a picture of systemic issues rather than isolated incidents. The council's response was unprecedented in its swiftness. They voted unanimously to create a special committee to review police protocols and training, with both Marcus and Diane invited to participate. The police chief, present at the meeting, publicly committed to immediate policy reviews and the implementation of body camera requirements for all officers. Most significantly, the mayor announced that Officer Daniels had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, and that Patricia Winters would face criminal charges for filing a false report with discriminatory intent. As the meeting concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by reporters, community members, and city officials eager to speak with him. Through it all, he maintained the poise and articulation that had impressed so many, even as he marveled at how quickly he had been thrust into the role of activist. The demonstration that weekend drew over 500 people to the park near the police station. What had been planned as a protest evolved into more of a community unity event. Marcus, Jamal, Zoe, and Tyler performed their song to rapt silence, followed by thunderous applause. Police officers, including the chief, attended in civilian clothes, listening rather than monitoring. Perhaps the most powerful moment came when 2 officers from another precinct approached Marcus after the performance. "What happened to you was wrong." The older officer said simply, "Not all of us are like that, and we want to be part of the change, not the problem." In the weeks that followed, real changes began to take shape. The police department implemented new training protocols and community engagement initiatives. The city council passed an ordinance specifically addressing false 911 calls based on racial bias. Officer Daniels was ultimately dismissed from the force, and the younger officer underwent retraining. Patricia Winters sold her house and moved away before her case went to trial, but not before being served with both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. Her hasty departure felt like an admission of guilt to many in the community. For the Jackson family, healing came gradually. The legal settlement they received from the city wasn't about money. Most of it went into a foundation Marcus established to provide music education and mentorship to underprivileged youth. The true compensation was in the policy changes, the accountability, and the community that had emerged stronger from the crisis. 3 months after the incident, on a warm summer evening, Marcus hosted another music night. This time, the gathering was larger, not just his close friends, but many of the neighbors and community members who had stood with them through everything. Eleanor Watson brought her piano students. Mr. Rivera brought his guitar. Emma came with homemade cookies and a shy smile. They set up speakers on the front lawn, the same spot where Marcus had been tased, deliberately reclaiming the space. The music was louder this time, with the proper permits obtained and neighbors notified. It wasn't just an act of defiance, but one of healing, of community building. As twilight softened into evening, Marcus stood before the gathering with his friends beside him. "A few months ago, something ugly happened here," he said, his voice carrying across attentive faces. "But look at what's grown from it. Look at us now." He gestured around at the diverse crowd, different ages, backgrounds, ethnicities, all sharing food and music and conversation on his front lawn. This is what community should be, not divided by fear or suspicion, but united by respect and understanding. The music we're sharing tonight isn't just entertainment, it's communication, it's connection, it's healing. As if to underscore his words, a police car drove slowly past the gathering. The officer inside one of those who had attended the demonstration smiled and waved. Marcus waved back, feeling something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Later, as stars appeared in the darkening sky, Diane found her son sitting on the porch steps, watching the mingling crowd with quiet satisfaction. "You've done something remarkable," she said, settling beside him. "You took something traumatic and transformed it into positive change. I'm so proud of you." Marcus leaned against her shoulder. "The way he used to as a child? I couldn't have done it without you. Without everyone who stood up when it mattered." "That's how change happens," she replied softly. "Not alone, but together." In the yard before them, someone had started an impromptu dance circle. Laughter and music rose into the night air, not too loud, but clear and joyful, a testament to resilience and the power of community to heal even the deepest wounds. The decibel meter sat unused on a nearby table, no longer necessary in a neighborhood that had learned the difference between noise and harmony. Marcus smiled and rose to his feet, extending a hand to his mother. "Come on, they're playing our song." As they joined the dancing crowd, Marcus caught sight of a moving truck down the street, a new family arriving to fill the house Patricia Winters had vacated. Tomorrow, he would welcome them properly, invite them into the community that had been forged through fire but emerged stronger, more inclusive, and ultimately more just. For tonight, though, he would simply dance, letting the music wash away the last shadows of that terrible night, celebrating not just what they had overcome, but what they had built in its place, a true community where every voice could be heard, where justice wasn't just an ideal, but a living practice, and where a 17-year-old could stand on his own lawn without fear, surrounded by the harmony he had helped create.